Welcome to the ArtCAM Standard Overview. In this session, we are going to learn how to create this rooster. This is actually the New Year's Chinese animal for this year. And with this, we're going to work with these pre-created vectors. We're going to take them and create a new 3D relief. Now, oftentimes when you go to create a relief, one thing you do need is a border surrounding the entire piece. And here you can see we have lots of separate little bits and pieces, and nothing's really truly connected. So we need to create a border surrounding the whole design. Now I have some tips in ArtCAM that will make this easier for you. Probably the easiest, or one of the easiest ways to do this, is to grab all of your vectors, and we're simply going to use the offset tool. So let's zoom in a little closer. I'm going to choose radius, and I'm going to drag this guy out, let's say around there. What we've done is just try to get sort of a consistent gap thickness here for our entire design. Now I'm going to switch this to sharp, and we'll bring this back in. So you can see when we do these offsets, we have the choice to either radius out those corners or keep the inner corners nice and clean and sharp. And that's what we wanted for this part that we were dropping back in. As we did that offset, it basically joined everything together for us, giving us a nice, perfect outline. So let's close the offset tool. There you can see the outline of our design. Now starting with this, let's start making this 3D. We're going to use the outline to start with, but let's make a couple quick changes. We have here, a couple little vectors we don't really need from the offsetting. And if we take a look at the legs, they're kind of pinched in, and that's just because of the large gap. But in ArtCAM, it's really easy for me to get into those original points and nodes that make up this design, pick them up, move them around, even delete them to help clean it up. So with that design, we grab our outline and let's do our first 3D shape. I'm going to use a tool called the Shape Editor. This is a really great tool. It allows me to do very basic shapes of either flat, squared or triangular, and round. Now if we turn our vector design off so we can see strictly the relief, you can see it's a little bit too bubbly, a little too thick. So I'm just going to take this and slide it down. We can go very low. We can even go down into the negative. You can set this part up roughly how you want. And in this case, I want to go with a pretty low angle. I'm also going to take it and just lift it up a little extra height. What this does is give it a nice, clean, flat start height or thickness at the base, kind of making the whole rooster a little more pronounced or stronger. Okay, let's apply and close that off. And that is our first basic 3D shape. Next, I want to work on the body a little more. So I'd like to raise up the area where we have here the chest through to the wing and some of the head. I don't want to make the rest thicker, just those areas. So let's take a look at our vector work. Let's turn our vector lines back on. We have here some wing tips. We have wings. That's not a whole piece here. That's not a whole piece. I don't really have a whole piece representing the area that I want to raise up, so I'm going to have to make it. Now again, I don't need to draw this from scratch. I can work from the existing vectors that are already there. I am, however, going to make a new vector layer. I'm going to call this body, so it keeps it separate for me. It makes it easier to organize and to work with just these vectors on their own. I'm going to grab the outline because I want to use part of that vector, and I'm also going to grab this head because I want to use this nice inner cut. Let's copy those. We're going to look at just the body vector and paste them so that we're working with those on their own, and this way we don't accidentally mess with any of the other vectors. So what I want to do is keep this part of the head and attach it to the rest of the body. So we kind of need to do a little bit of a cutting here. Into our nose, we're going to slice it here and remove that bottom half because it's the top half that I'm interested in. And then for the large outline, we're going to see to cut in the same place, right here and here. And we're going to delete the top half of the outline so that then we can take the cutout head shape along with the rest of the outline and we're going to join them together. So ArtCAM has tools that will join and close those vectors off for us. Now this is almost the shape we're after. We need to do a little bit more changing with it. I don't want to actually include the legs or the tail. So back into our node editing, I'm going to slice it right here with the letter C, cut with C, and delete the bottom half that we don't want. We'll re-grab this guy, and then I'll use ArtCAM's close with a curve, which will give me a nice, clean, smooth change. Now we can take these pieces and we can alter them. We can even insert extra nodes. I'd insert a node here. You can see how we can move and change this design. Maybe we want to pull this off like that. And I think that should work pretty good. So let's get out of our node editing. And there is our vector that we're going to thicken up at this point. So we're going to take this piece, and in the shape editor, let's open it up. We are going to use a rounded shape. We're going to go with a simple angle again. So let's drop this down closer to 10, 11, 12, somewhere around there. And we're going to set this up with, no, that's, we don't need a start height. So let's just apply and cancel that. Turn our line work off so we can see what we've just made. Now that doesn't look bad. We're going to do a little bit of sculpting to fix this piece up. Before I do sculpt though, we're going to add in one more piece. We're just going to add the legs in. So let's turn our vectors back on and turn on all the pieces. We'll grab these two legs, open up the shape editor. We're going to go round, but maybe not that full 45. Let's go around 25, 30. Somewhere around there is good. Apply that, close it off, and this is what we have. So at this point, like I said, we want to clean this up. We have here a pretty obvious seam line where this newer part meets the lower part. That's what I want to soften out. And then I don't just want to soften it out, I actually want to extend it down into the legs and into the tail a little bit. To do this, we're going to use our sculpting tools. ArtCAM has some really fantastic sculpting tools. The sculpting will allow me to play with this 3D model as if I had clay in front of me. I'm going to be able to push it, pull it, kind of sand it down and smooth it out. However, when I'm doing all this, I could very easily push and pull it right off the nice clean edge of the rooster. So to prevent that from happening, all we have to do is color in the area that we want to keep it within. So I'm going to grab here our purple color, and I'm going to tell it to fill that vector in with purple so that now when I sculpt, I can say, don't go past the purple edge. Color within the lines. All right, so we have that done. Let's open up our sculpting tools. Here we have sculpting, and I'm going to start with the first tool, which is smooth. Let's bring up our radius, and we're also going to make sure that we're sculpting under color so that it stays within the purple. And the first thing I'm going to do is just smooth to clean up that seam line. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be pretty good. I can also come and clean up any pulls that I have. These little pulls coming across the model are simply because we have sharp little lines in the vector. If we were to alter the original vector before we made the relief, that would have fixed that up. I'm also going to soften up this seam line on the inside here. Okay, that's good. And then we're going to switch over to the smudge tool. So the smudge tool is the one that works like clay. It allows you to push and pull that model around. Other tools we have here, we have a deposit, we have carve, we have erase, and we also have a clone type tool. So with the smudge tool, I can now take this leg with the upper thicker part of the body and I'm going to push it into the leg, kind of thickening up the leg area. Do the same thing with the other leg. You kind of see the legs forming and coming into play. Now we're going to do the same thing with the tail. So I'm going to take this body and I'm going to push it up and into that tail so that it kind of curves with the tail. So every time I push this through, I'm pulling more material. And don't worry about those little lines. That is not a big deal. It just has to do with my cursor coming off the edge, which I can fix up very easily in my next step with the sculpting tools. So we make sure we kind of get the curves that we want on this part. That's starting to look good. There we go. And then we come back with the smooth tool and watch when I go over these edges. It gets rid of any of those lines or any of those pulls by simply basically sanding over them. It also gives me a really nice effect around the edge where it gives me a nice radius. So I'm going to use this tool to go around all my edges and kind of soften them, smooth them, or radius them. You can see the difference it makes in the part. So as we sculpt, we just hold the cursor down and sculpt around. You can also do this with a tablet where you can work with a pen in your hand. It's a very nice artistic way to work. And depending on the tablet, for example, if you have a Wacom tablet, the harder you press on the pen, the more material it naturally sculpts. There we go. Let's close the sculpting tool and take a look at our work so far. So you can see the parts starting to come together. Now let's add in a little bit more detail. So let's turn our vectors back on. Let's start with the head here. So let's grab this head vector. There we go. And we'll go back to our shape editor. We've done a lot of round stuff, so let's start working with some of the square options. If I pick square, turn my vectors off, you can see it's a little much there. So let's start by dropping that angle down. If we bring it down to around the 15 mark, doesn't have to be exact, just close. And then I put in a special option, which will allow me to limit the height. What this does is chops it off flat at whatever thickness I tell it. So you can see this stops it from becoming too embossed throughout the center. It just gives me this nice sort of chamfered angled edge. And that will change the look of it as I change the angle. You can see how this tool is live. It's really, really fantastic way this works. It allows you to be much more artistic with your designs. I think that looks pretty good. So we'll go ahead and apply that. And I'm going to close because I'm mostly happy with the shape. I like the bottom. I like the chamfered edge we have on the base here along the neckline and the top of the head, but I don't like it so much on the inside. Now we could stop and try and use a whole new tool to do this in a different way, or I can simply just grab my sculpting tools to clean this up a little bit. So with the sculpting, if I go into my smooth tool and I come through, I can smooth this out. There we go. And we're just kind of softening off that seam, leaving the outside nice, crisp, and sharp. Okay, let's close the sculpting and we'll view from the top. And this is our rooster to date. So next what we're going to do is just a little extra detail. Let's turn some vectors on. And let's say we want to start with our wingtips here. Let's grab these guys, open up our shape editor. In this case, maybe we want to go square. If we turn that off and drop this angle down to something a little more reasonable, I think that will work. So let's apply that. I'm just turning or toggling these line works, the vectors off and on for you, so it's a little bit easier to see the actual relief. I do this often when I'm working inside the 3D view. You could also work inside the 2D view for all of your vector type design. Let's apply that. And if we go with these guys, we're going to go square again. Again, we can turn them off so we can actually see what's happening. And in this case, we're going to drag this one into the negative. Even a little further if we want. Again, because those live tools, you can see how it works as we move along with this piece. Let's apply that. And vectors back on. Let's get to our headdress here. We're going to give this a rounded shape. Let's bring that down again to a more reasonable angle and apply it. We have also the neck piece here. This one we're going to do something slightly different. We're going to go round, but we're going to go in the negative. We're also going to give it a very small start height. What this will do is just lift it up a little bit. So let's apply and look at the vector or look at the design here so you can see what I'm talking about. So we lifted it up a little bit and scooped it in. Okay, let's turn the line work back on. Here we go. We still have to do the beak. So this one we're going to give a slight round shape. Oh, something like, let's go a little bit more. Let's go around there. Apply, close that off. And if we turn the line work off, this is what we're up to so far. Now the next piece I want to work on is the wing. If we take a look at our vectors, I have this piece for the wing, and then we have this piece, but that piece also includes the body, the tail, the legs, which I don't really want. I just want to focus on making the wing thicker. Now I could draw an entirely new vector, or I can work from what I have right now, start making it 3D, and adjust it as I go, which is a really great way. So I'm going to grab this vector, I'm going to come in a little bit closer, and I'm going to open the shape editor. We're going to give this piece the same sort of general shape that we did for the head above. So we're going to go with square. We're going to drop that angle down to something a little more reasonable, and then we're going to chop it off flat at 50 thou. Now if I turn the vectors off so you can see the shape, here is the sort of wing shape. And obviously that's just not covering the area that we need. So if I turn the line work back on, turn on the vectors, what I can do with this is actually be very interactive. This whole tool works live, which means I can take and adjust any one of these points. I can even come, say, from here to here and say, let's delete those points and make it a straight line, which then would allow me to maybe move this up here, doing something like this. Maybe let's come over here. Let's go like here. Let's delete a few extra points. And we can even eye to insert points and see how the shape changes the 3D piece live and interactively as I move this around. It works really, really fantastic. We can change the curve here, have this turn into a bit of a softer curve out. And let's bring this down. I like to have a nice curve that's going to flow with the existing design. If we turn the vectors off, we can kind of see how it all fits together, which then allows us to come through and make some small adjustments. So I can say, oh, you know what, we're going to move this to around there. Let's try that. Let's see how that looks. And that's flowing pretty good. Yeah, maybe we'll change that and change this. There, I'm pretty happy with that. So let's stand it up just a little bit more. I'd like to see this slightly stronger because it's kind of blending in with everything else. And that's again where that start height comes in. So if I take this piece and I give it just a small start height, it lifts it up a little bit thicker so we can really see that relief. That looks better. That's what we need. So I'm going to apply and close this off. And we're going to fix it up a little bit more. What I'd like to see is the wing spans at the end nice and strong. But at the beginning here, where it comes out of the body, I want that thinner. I want it kind of faded into the body a little more. Now we have fade tools and other tools that we could use to do this, or a very quick way to do this is to once again use our sculpting tools to fix it up. So before I do that though, I'm going to go back to my 2D view, and with that vector selected, I'm going to paint it in so that I have sort of a masked off area so I can't sculpt past that boundary. So now with that, we're going to open up our sculpting tools, and we have our smooth and our smudge are the main ones we're going to work with. I'm going to start with the smudge, and I'm going to take the part of the wing where it's supposed to be growing out of the body, and I'm going to push it in towards the wing. This will kind of flatten out that area. It'll thin it out while thickening the rest of the wing. Again, I'm not worried about the lines so much just yet. We'll worry about those later. I'm also going to push out into the wings, into the tips there, and what that'll do is make them a little more pronounced, a little stronger. Not only do I want to push them out, but I'm going to take the crease in between them and pull them back in, and you can see how that kind of folds in with the wing. So let's take those, pull those in, and again, I'm not worried about these little lines. It's only because I've let my cursor go outside of the area, which I can fix very quickly with our smoothing tool. So the smoothing tool, if we go back to that and we come over this model now, you can see how it softens it back out, and we can soften up all those lines that we pulled out. And after I've done that, I think I might go back in with the smudge tool just one last time. So if we go back to smudge and just pull each one of these wingspans just a little bit to make those ends slightly stronger. Okay, let's close the sculpting tool and take a look at the entire rooster. So far, so good. He's coming along quite well. So the last little bit is just some decoration. Now, in this case, we are going to turn our vectors back on. We have, here we go, a couple little holes or divots we're going to put into the wings, as well as this area, and here too. So let's open up the shape editor again. We're going to go round, turn our vectors off, and let's drop this into the negative. We're going to go fairly deep with it. And I find this looks quite nice with our wing pieces, and this piece is okay, but this piece goes a little too deep. The idea here is we're going to make a hole, and then we're going to put the eyeball inside the hole, and I don't want that to be too deep down. So I'm going to use my limit option, tell it to flatten out at 50 thou, and you can see here the flat center that it's created for us. Let's apply that, turn our vectors on. Let's zoom into the eye, so we can grab now that center eye. We're going to go round. Again, I'm going to go up quite high, but I want to make sure that I keep it within a certain limit. So again, I'm going to flatten it out, which gives me just a very small little flat area. Now when we add this last piece in, we're going to have that spike right down in. That spike is going to give us a more obvious hole than what the round one would. So let's turn those vectors off and take a look at our rooster. Okay, the rooster looks quite good. Let's turn our draw zero plane off. And here is the finished design. So we've used quite a few tools in here. Mainly, we've used our shape editor and our sculpting to achieve this point. Now, just for future stuff, something to keep in mind whenever you create a 3D relief is it's always handy to add it into your clip art library. The clip art library allows you to store any kind of relief that you want. We actually supply this with the install of ArtCAM, and it comes with over 500 3D reliefs. So if I go to some of these sections, all of these gold reliefs come installed with ArtCAM. They're 3D pieces, just like the rooster here, that are ready for you to use however you need. Now, if we wanted to add the rooster in here so we could use it, say, down the road in another project in the future, I typically go to my custom reliefs folder, and then we're going to come and find our relief layer that is the rooster. I'm just going to rename it, and then you simply drag and drop from one side to the other, and it adds it right into the library for you. Now we have this gold rooster sitting there ready to use at any time we want. If we were to load it back in, what it does is it brings it in as a floating blue clipper, at which point you can resize, you can rotate, you can change, you can thin it, thicken it, and add it to any different piece. So that's one extra thing you could do with this. Let's close that off. Another option, maybe you wanted to add some texture into this design or a background for it to sit on. If we turn our background back on, and for instance, we go to our texture relief tool. This is a really great tool and gives you a lot of choices. There's some default options you can work with, or we can also work from a file. Now I'm just going to make a new relief layer. This means that I can change the texture separately from the rooster, which is quite helpful when you're making multiple designs. I'm going to choose a texture file and see all of these files here. These are all available inside that texture relief library. So the same place we just saw all the other pieces and where we added the rooster in, there is actually a folder that's called texture. So I can grab any one of these, click open, and then I can kind of resize it, make the whole repeatable piece larger, smaller, thinner, however you think is going to best fit this part. And we simply add it in. And so there we kind of took this design and placed the rooster on this sort of interesting looking textured background. So throughout this tutorial, if we backtrack a little, we've seen the texture, we've seen the clipart library, but we've spent a lot of focus on the shape editor and the sculpting. With the shape editor, you have those standard shapes, the round and the square, but starting to use things like your limit to height can really open up how you can work with your design and it gives you a lot more options. And then the sculpting tools, I mean, how quick and easy was that for me to take this piece, slightly, smooth out those seam lines or just make one part flow into the other, as with the legs and the wings. So those tools are all very useful, very powerful tools that you get with ArtCAM Standard. I'd like to thank you for joining into this session, and I hope you enjoy watching some more.